What if the world's second highest mountain was also its most merciless graveyard? What if behind every breathtaking summit photo, there were ghosts, climbers who vanished into thin air, never to be seen again? Welcome to K2 Stories, where today we unravel the dark truth about the mountain that mountaineers call the Savage Peak. If Everest is the dream, then K2 is the nightmare. And tonight, you're about to find out why. The legend of K2 rising 8,611 meters above sea level, K2 is not just another mountain. It's a monster carved out of rock, ice, and storms. Climbers call it the Mountain of Mountains, but more often, they call it the Killer. Unlike Everest, which has been commercialized with fixed ropes, guides, and long queues of climbers, K2 remains wild, untamed, and cruel. The weather changes without warning. Avalanches thunder down its slopes, and the margin for error is non-existent. One misstep, and you disappear into the abyss. For decades, climbers have been drawn to K2 like moths to a flame. They dream of standing on its summit, but many never return. Some bodies are still frozen in place along the climbing routes, serving as grim markers for those who follow. Others, however, vanish completely. No body, no trace. Just whispers in the wind and unanswered questions. And those are the stories we're about to tell. The summer of 1986, the year of tragedy. To understand the mystery of disappearances on K2, we have to go back to the infamous summer of 1986. That year, more than a dozen expeditions gathered at the foot of the mountain, hoping to reach the summit. But what unfolded was one of the deadliest seasons in climbing history. The weather turned on them like a predator. Ferocious storms trapped climbers high on the mountain, where oxygen is thin and survival is nearly impossible. Some tried to descend, but vanished in the whiteout. Others were last seen alive clinging to icy ridges, only to disappear the next day. Take the case of Julie Tullis, a British climber. She and her partner, Kurt Diemberger, managed to reach the summit, but on the way down, Julie collapsed. Exhausted, starving, and gasping for air, she was left in a small tent with a handful of other climbers waiting for the storm to pass. Days later, when the survivors finally made it down, Julie was gone. To this day, her body has never been recovered. Did she slip away in the storm? Was she buried under avalanches? Or is she still up there, entombed forever in the ice? Nobody knows. Then there was Alan Rouse, the first British climber to attempt the summit of K2. He reached the top but paid the ultimate price. During the storm, he was last seen alive, delirious and frostbitten, stumbling outside the tent. When rescuers came days later, his body was gone. The mountain swallowed him whole. That summer alone, 13 climbers died. Some were buried by avalanches, others fell, and some, like Julie and Alan, simply vanished, leaving families without answers and fellow climbers haunted by the mystery. The disappearance that shook the world. 2008. Fast forward to August 2008. More than 25 climbers from around the world set their sights on the summit. What began as a day of triumph turned into a nightmare. As the climbers descended from the summit, an avalanche ripped through the bottleneck, the most dangerous section of K2. Fixed ropes were destroyed. Chaos erupted. Climbers were stranded above 8,000 meters, what mountaineers call the death zone. One by one they vanished. Some were swept away by falling ice, their bodies lost forever in the void. Others disappeared during desperate attempts to descend without ropes. Radios went silent. Camps at the base of the mountain waited for voices that would never come. Among the missing was Dren Mandic, a young climber from Serbia. Witnesses said he slipped early in the climb and disappeared down a hidden crevasse. His team searched frantically, but he was gone. No body, no trace. Only his name added to the long list of those claimed by the savage peak. In total, 11 climbers perished in 2008. Some bodies were eventually recovered, frozen in grotesque postures along the route. Others remain missing to this day. Their fate's a chilling mystery. Why do so many vanish on K2? K2 doesn't just kill, it erases. The mountain is riddled with deep crevasses, hidden beneath thin layers of snow. One wrong step, and you're swallowed whole, entombed, hundreds of feet below, never to be seen again. Avalanches bury climbers under tons of ice in seconds. Ferocious storms scatter the remains, leaving no trace for search teams. But beyond the physical dangers lies something darker, the psychological pull of the mountain. Climbers know the risks, yet they come anyway. Some say K2 whispers to them, luring them higher, daring them to try. And when they disappear, it's as if the mountain itself has claimed their souls. A silent witness. At K2's base lies the Gilkey Memorial, a stone-covered shrine where plaques bear the names of those who died on the mountain. It's a chilling place, rows upon rows of names, each representing a climber who never came home. But among those names are the ones whose bodies were never found, whose disappearances remain unsolved mysteries. Imagine being a family member, waiting for news that never comes. Imagine the mountain holding on to your loved one forever, refusing to give them back. That's the cruel truth of K2. It doesn't just take lives, it steals closure. And this is only the beginning. Because in the next part of our story we'll dive deeper into specific cases that left the world baffled. Stories of climbers who seem to vanish in thin air, leaving behind nothing but rumors, suspicion, and chilling photographs taken just moments before they disappeared. Stay with us, because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. Imagine this. You set off on the climb of a lifetime, your friends watching from base camp, cameras flashing, radios buzzing with excitement. Hours later, you vanish. No scream, no signal, no body. This isn't a ghost story. This is K2. And in part 2 of our journey, we dive into the cases that haunt the mountain to this day. Stories of climbers who disappeared as if the savage peak had swallowed them whole. The vanishing of Dudley Wolfe. The first mystery. The first known disappearance. On K2 dates back to 1939, long before modern gear, GPS, or satellite phones. An American expedition, led by Fritz Wiesner, attempted to reach the summit. Among the team was Dudley Wolfe, a wealthy climber with limited experience. As the expedition struggled against storms and exhaustion, Wolfe was left stranded high on the mountain at over 7,000 meters. His teammates promised to come back for him. Days turned into weeks, and Wolfe remained alone in the death zone. When rescuers finally tried to reach him, they never made it back. In fact, 3 Sherpas sent to save him also vanished. To this day, Wolfe's body has never been found. Some climbers believe he died alone in his tent, buried under ice. Others whisper that the mountain itself erased him, along with those who dared to bring him down. That was the first time K2 showed the world its cruel secret. Here, disappearances are not exceptions. They're part of the mountain's DNA, the Phantom of the Bottleneck. One of the most chilling stories comes from the Bottleneck, the infamous section just below the summit. Dozens of climbers have died there, and many never returned. In 1995, British climber Alison Hargreaves, a mother of 2 and one of the strongest alpinists of her generation, reached the summit of K2 without bottled oxygen. It was an extraordinary feat. But on her descent, disaster struck. A sudden storm ripped across the mountain. Fellow climbers reported seeing Alison fighting against the wind, her figure barely visible in the blizzard. Then, nothing. She was gone. No body was ever recovered. No gear, no trace. Her children were left with a mother who had simply disappeared into the storm. To this day, climbers passing through the bottleneck claim to feel an eerie presence, as if Allison still lingers there, warning others of what awaits. The Korean Mystery, 1995. That same season, the Korean expedition faced tragedy of its own. Choi Soon-ho, an experienced climber, was last seen alive descending near Camp 4. His teammates lost sight of him in the storm. When the weather cleared, he had vanished. No body was found, no equipment left behind. His disappearance raised questions. Did he fall into a hidden crevasse? Was he blown off the ridge by hurricane-force winds? Or was there something darker, something we may never understand? To this day, his family in South Korea has no grave to visit, no remains to mourn. Just an empty space and a name engraved at the Gilkey Memorial. The 2010 expedition. The case of Denis Urubko's friends in 2010. A team of elite climbers, including the legendary Kazakh alpinist Denis Urubko, attempted a new route. But tragedy followed. Two of his teammates, experienced, strong, prepared, vanished during descent. Their last radio transmission was chilling. "We can't find the ropes." After that, silence. Search parties combed the slopes, but found nothing. No bodies, no gear. Just silence, as if the mountain had erased their existence in an instant. For Denis Urubko, it was a personal nightmare. He returned alive, but forever scarred, carrying with him the mystery of his lost companions. Why do the disappearances keep happening? On most mountains, when climbers die, their bodies are found, frozen, buried, or resting along the route. K2, however, disappearance is almost routine. The reasons are chillingly simple. Crevasses, deep cracks that swallow climbers without a trace. Avalanches, walls of snow and ice that bury victims instantly. Storms, winds strong enough to hurl climbers off ridges into oblivion. The death zone, where even the strongest bodies break down and the weakest steps can be fatal. But beyond science, there's something more. A mythic aura that surrounds K2. Among Sherpas and Balti porters, whispers circulate. The mountain is alive. It chooses who climbs and who disappears. And those who vanish are not gone. They belong to K2 now. The emotional toll for families, the disappearance is far worse than death. A body offers closure, but a disappearance is an open wound. Think of Alison Hargreaves's children growing up, without their mother, wondering if she suffered, if she cried for them in her final moments. Think of Dudley Wolfe's descendants, still without answers nearly a century later. Think of climbers like Choi Soon-ho, remembered only by a plaque on a pile of stones in Pakistan, with no remains to bring home. K2 doesn't just take lives. It takes certainty. It takes peace. It takes the last goodbye. A mountain of ghosts. When climbers approach K2, they walk past the Gilkey Memorial. The stones are heavy, the wind cold, the names endless. But among them are those with no graves, no bodies, just the word, missing. To climb K2 is to walk among ghosts. And for every step toward the summit, you wonder, will I return? Or will I become another story whispered in the storm, another name etched on the mountain's wall of shadows? And as we move into the next part of our story, we'll explore the modern disappearances, cases captured by cameras, where last photos and videos show smiling climbers one moment, and then nothing. Cases that fuel conspiracy theories, from secret falls to hidden truths the mountain will never reveal. Stay with us, because the deeper we go, the more K2 blurs the line between tragedy and legend. A final photograph. A wave to the camera, a smiling face against the frozen sky. And then, nothing. These are the modern mysteries of K2, where disappearances are not legends from the past, but chilling realities captured on film. In this part, we uncover the last images, the last words, and the last steps of climbers who walked into the storm and never returned. The 2013 mystery, Marty Schmidt and his son in July 2013, New Zealand father and son duo Marty and Denali. Schmidt attempted K2 together. Marty was a seasoned alpinist, Denali young and full of fire. They climbed higher than anyone else that season, establishing their camp at a dizzying 7,400 meters. Then, radio silence. A storm swept across K2, and no word came from the Schmidts. Days later, search teams found their tent obliterated by an avalanche, but of Marty and Denali, no trace. Their bodies were never recovered. The last photo shows father and son side by side smiling at the base camp, unaware that it would be their final portrait together. For New Zealand and the climbing world, it was a tragedy that felt like a cruel curse. A family wiped away by the savage peak, leaving only memories. Ethor, Pakistani tragedy. 2016, 3 years later, in 2016, tragedy struck again. Ali Sadpara, one of Pakistan's most respected climbers, joined an international team attempting the summit. The weather was brutal, forcing most to retreat. But one climber, Hassan Jan, was last seen pushing higher. Witnesses watched as he disappeared into the upper slopes. Hours passed. The summit team returned, but Hassan never did. Search parties scoured the route, but his body was never found. His family still waits for closure, his name now another silent echo in the Gilkey Memorial. The death of the Spaniard. 2018. In 2018, Spanish climber Sergio Mingote attempted to climb K2 without supplemental oxygen. Known for his endurance and courage, he pushed relentlessly toward the summit. But after reaching his high point, he vanished during the descent. His team reported seeing him only minutes before, descending slowly. Then he was gone. No scream, no fall heard, no trace of his body was ever recovered. Just an empty silence. Where a man had been moments before, theories range from a sudden slip into a hidden crevasse to being swept away by a micro-avalanche. But the truth is, no one knows. The 2021 disaster, the last photos, one of the most documented disappearances in K2's history, occurred in winter 2021, when a team attempted the mountain in its deadliest season. Among them were Ali Sadpara of Pakistan, John Snorri of Iceland, and Juan Pablo Moore of Chile. On February 5th, they were photographed at the bottleneck, smiling, determined, headlamps glowing against the dark. It was the last time the world saw them alive. Hours later, they vanished. Search operations involving drones, helicopters, and satellites scoured the mountain. For months, their families pleaded for answers. Finally, in July 2021, 5 months later, their bodies were discovered high on the slopes, preserved in ice. But until that moment, their disappearance had fueled conspiracy theories worldwide. Did they fall into the abyss? Did their oxygen systems fail? Or was there something darker the mountain hid from us? The last photos remain haunting. 3 men standing strong, moments before K2 claimed them forever. The last videos, proof of life, then silence. What makes modern disappearances so chilling is the technology. Unlike the climbers of 1939 or 1986, today's mountaineers carry cameras, drones, and radios. Their last smiles, last words, last breaths are captured forever. A climber waves to the camera saying, "See you at the top." Hours later, their name is engraved in stone. Another records the whipping wind outside their tent. The screen shakes, the sound cuts, and they are never seen again. It's as if the mountain is mocking us. You can record, you can film, you can scream into the void. But when I take you, I erase you. The conspiracy theories. When bodies vanish, theories bloom. Some say avalanches swept them away. Others whisper of hidden crevasses that hold dozens of climbers in icy tombs. But some theories go further. Sabotage. Rival teams cutting ropes or hoarding oxygen. Government secrecy. Unexplained disappearances involving climbers from certain nations. The supernatural. Locals whisper of mountain spirits that demand sacrifices. Are these wild stories, or desperate attempts to explain the inexplicable? On K2, truth and myth blend into one. The emotional weight of the last image. There's something uniquely haunting about seeing a person's last photograph. A smile frozen forever, knowing they never came back. Families replay those images endlessly, searching for clues, a shadow, a rope, a storm in the background. For climbers, these images are both warnings and temptations. They remind them of the risk, yet also inspire them to chase the summit. Because on K2, the line between glory and disappearance is just a breath away. The mountain that chooses. Perhaps the most chilling idea is this. Not everyone disappears. Some bodies remain, visible for decades, frozen along the route. Others are erased completely. Why? Some climbers believe K2 chooses. It keeps some as warnings, and takes others without a trace. To climb here is to play a game with fate, where the rules are written in ice and storm. Toward the next chapter, we've seen the disappearances of the past, the legends of 1939, 1986, and 1995. We've seen the modern vanishings captured on cameras, yet no less mysterious. But in the next part, we go deeper still. We'll uncover the unsolved mysteries, cases where the truth was twisted, where climbers were accused of betrayal, where survivors carried secrets they refused to share. Because sometimes on K2, the most terrifying mystery isn't just the mountain, it's the people climbing it. Stay with us, because part 4 is where the shadows grow darker. What if the greatest mystery of K2 isn't the storms, the avalanches, or the cold? What if it's the climbers themselves? Because some of K2's most haunting disappearances are wrapped in whispers of betrayal, secrets carried down the mountain, and truths too dark to tell. The 1954 Italian controversy, who reached the top. K2's first descent in 1954 should have been a moment of pure triumph. Achille Compagnoni and Lino Lacedelli planted the Italian flag on the summit. But behind the headlines lay a bitter controversy. Walter Bonatti, a young climber on the team, accused the leaders of betrayal. He claimed they deliberately forced him and Hunza Porter Mahdi to spend a deadly night in the open at 8,100 meters without tents or oxygen. Bonatti survived, but Mahdi suffered severe frostbite, losing all his fingers and toes. For decades, the Italian establishment painted Bonatti as a liar, accusing him of trying to steal glory. Only 50 years later did the truth finally emerge. Bonatti had told the truth all along, but the price was high. His reputation destroyed, Mahdi's life ruined, and a shadow cast over the very first ascent of K2. This wasn't a disappearance of bodies, it was the disappearance of truth. The case of the disappearing partners, 1986. The summer of 1986 is often called K2's Black Summer. 13 climbers died. But among the tragedies, one story stands out. Polish climber Wanda Rutkiewicz, one of the greatest female alpinists in history, climbed with Kurt Diemberger. On the descent, Wanda vanished. Some say she simply fell behind, overtaken by exhaustion. Others whisper she was abandoned, left alone in the storm. Her body was never recovered. Diemberger survived, but carried the heavy shadow of suspicion. Did he do everything he could? Or did ambition force terrible choices in the death zone? No one will ever know. The 1995 Mystery. Alison Hargreaves. In 1995, British climber Alison Hargreaves, already famous for soloing Everest without oxygen, attempted K2. She reached the summit on August 13th. It should have been her crowning moment. But on the descent, disaster struck. A storm swept across the mountain, and Alison, along with 5 others, vanished. Witnesses last saw her being blown off the ridge by hurricane-force winds. Her body was never found. Yet controversy brewed. Some accused the men in her group of leaving her behind, while others claimed she took reckless risks, driven by fame. Back in Britain, the press turned cruel, questioning why a mother of 2 would risk her life at all. Her disappearance became more than a tragedy. It became a debate about motherhood, ambition, and sacrifice. Her children grew up without answers, only the ghost of a mother lost to the savage peak. The silent survivors. One of the darkest aspects of K2's history is the survivors who descend with stories and secrets. A climber returns, claiming his partner fell, but there are no witnesses. Another swears a teammate disappeared in a storm, yet others saw him alive hours later. Some descend with frostbitten hands and haunted eyes, refusing to ever speak of what really happened up there. These silences raise the most chilling question. How many disappearances were truly accidents? And how many were the result of choices made in desperation? Cutting a rope, leaving someone behind, saving oneself at any cost? On K2, survival is a razor's edge, and sometimes morality disappears faster than the climbers themselves. The porters' stories, forgotten voices high on K2. Foreign climbers make the headlines. But the silent backbone of every expedition are the Pakistani porters and Sherpas. They carry loads, fix ropes, risk their lives. Many of them have vanished too, yet their names rarely make the news. A porter falls into a crevasse. Another disappears in an avalanche. Their bodies never recovered, their stories never told. For every famous disappearance on K2, there are dozens of forgotten ones. Locals whisper that the mountain takes more porters than climbers, but the world only remembers the ones with cameras and sponsors. The legacy of lies. What makes these stories even more haunting is how often the truth is buried. Reports are changed. Diaries vanish. Leaders write memoirs that contradict survivors. And by the time the world learns the truth, decades later, the climbers are already gone. On K2, memory itself is fragile. Truth disappears as easily as a climber into the storm. The darkest question. Perhaps the darkest question of all is this. Did some climbers disappear not because of the mountain, but because of each other? In the chaos of storm and death, were ropes cut to save oneself? Were partners abandoned in silence, their last cries swallowed by the wind? Were some disappearances convenient? The answers lie buried in snow and conscience, and those who know will never tell. The edge of shadows as night falls on K2, the mountain looms with both majesty and menace. Its slopes are littered with stories, some told, many silenced. Bodies vanish, yes, but so do truths, reputations, and trust. And this is where the real horror lies. K2 doesn't just claim lives, it claims stories. It erases them, but not all. Some ghosts refuse to stay buried, and in the final chapter, we'll return to those ghosts. The climbers whose last steps were captured, whose remains still lie on the mountain, frozen in time, staring at those who dare to pass. Because on K2, Some disappear forever, and some never let go. What if I told you? The dead of K2 are still there, not buried, not gone, but staring at every climber who dares to pass. On the Savage Mountain, death doesn't disappear. It becomes a landmark. The frozen sentinels, unlike Everest, where many bodies are removed, K2 is too dangerous. When a climber dies here, they often remain, forever, frozen in ice, preserved by cold. They become part of the mountain itself. These bodies, some decades old, are not hidden. Climbers step over them, rope past them, sometimes even rest beside them. They are reminders, warnings, and, most terrifyingly, companions. Mountain is littered with these silent guardians, whom climbers have given haunting nicknames. The Case of the Sleeping Beauty. In 1986, among the many who perished, one woman's body became infamous. Renata Klumska, often misidentified but remembered as the Sleeping Beauty of K2, lay frozen on the slope, her face calm, almost peaceful. For years, climbers passed her body, untouched, whispering prayers. She became a legend, not for how she climbed, but for how she remained, hauntingly beautiful in death, as if merely asleep beneath the snow. The bottleneck's guardians. Perhaps the most chilling are those near the bottleneck, the narrow, deadly passage where avalanches strike. Without warning. Here, bodies dangle in harnesses, suspended as if still climbing. Others lie collapsed, ropes still threaded through their frozen hands. Imagine climbing at 200 meters, gasping for breath, and looking up to see the empty eyes of someone who never made it. On K2, you don't just battle the mountain, you climb through a graveyard. The story of Alison Hargreaves's ghost. Though Alison Hargreaves's body was never found, climbers speak of her presence. Some claim to hear a woman's voice in the storm. Others say they've seen a figure on the ridge moving just beyond reach. Is it hallucination from thin air? Or is it memory, grief, and legend merging into a ghost that refuses to fade? On K2, even absence feels like presence. Why the bodies remain? Why not remove them? The answer is cruelly simple. It's impossible. At those altitudes, every step feels like lifting iron. To carry a body down would require a dozen men risking their own lives. And so, the dead stay where they fall. Each season, new climbers pass them. Some take photos, others refuse to look, but no one can ignore them. K2 is not just a mountain, it is a cemetery in the sky. The living and the dead survivors describe how the bodies affect them. One climber recalls brushing past a frozen hand, stiff as wood. Another describes looking into a face, snow-blind eyes staring through him. Some say the dead almost speak, warning them to turn back. And yet, they keep climbing. Because on K2, the pull of the summit is stronger than the fear of death. The twist. K2's final truth here lies the cruel irony. On K2 to disappear completely is almost rare. Most remain, preserved, eternal reminders. The true mystery isn't just who vanished, but why some are still there, year after year, watching. It is as if the mountain itself decides. Some, I will erase. Some, I will keep. And all who pass will remember them. The emotional end for the families. The pain never ends. Some take comfort in knowing their loved one is still there, a part of the mountain. Others are tormented, unable to bring them home. K2 doesn't just take lives, it steals closure. It leaves scars on those who wait below, wondering if the last photo, the last smile, was really the end, or just the beginning of an eternal vigil on the mountain. Final words. The mountain's verdict. The end. K2 doesn't need myths or ghosts. The truth is chilling enough. It is a place where bodies lie frozen, where names vanish in storms, where climbers step into the sky knowing they may never step down. And yet, they keep coming. Because to touch K2's summit is to touch immortality, even if it costs everything. And maybe that is K2's greatest secret. The mountain doesn't just take lives, it makes legends. Every disappearance, every frozen face, every unanswered question is part of a story too powerful to resist. And that's why we tell these stories here, on K2 Stories. If you want more mysteries, more legends, more truths buried in the ice, then subscribe now. Because the next story might be even darker.